First order was call the order. Approval of the agenda. Everybody had a chance to look over the agenda. Any questions or additions? All right. Do we need to have a motion on approving the agenda?
Yes,
So
to actually approve it, you would.
I'll second that. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. It is approved. Call to the public.
There's no one
Move on.
online at this time, Mr. Chairman.
And we'll move on to the county drain at large discussion. We got your money
He did, yeah, so
getting caught up.
the county, the drain revolving discussion, could you hand one of those to?
Your hands.
Thank you,
Good
sir.
morning, by the way.
Good morning. Sorry, usually there are a few minutes in between meetings, but this morning we've been really hearing from a lot of good at the committee, so we just don't want them to end. So thank you, Drain Commissioner Willoughby, for joining us this morning. This is not about the drain revolving fund. This discussion is about the county drain at large assessment. So all those drainage districts that we have throughout the county that our residents get assessed on, the county pays a portion of those drainage districts, right?
You're one of the at-larges.
And that's, okay, not every district then. Maybe you
No.
can explain that, Bob.
Well, just so, some drains just have the county at-large and then the township.
Okay.
But if you've got a railroad involved in it or a municipality, MDOT, anything like that, you can assess, they have an at-large too. And then you take all your at-larges off the top of your price, and then the remaining balance is assessed to the property owners.
Excellent discussion. Excellent. Thank you. So we have, it's a budget line item every year in our general fund budget. Melissa helped me out. I think this year it's approaching 390,000, or last year it approached 390,000. We're approaching 400,000, and traditionally it had been, in that, maybe in the high 200s, right? But then you did a lot of work, Bob, on Mission Creek and
Well,
Little
whenever you add
Tobacco,
on, construction costs have doubled and tripled.
Sure.
And whenever you add one, I basically had 6 or 7 drains in the middle of the process when I took over from Rex.
Sure.
And I've actually only done 1 drain since I've been here. The rest of them have been,
Wow.
actually had the petition before I got here. But we're continuing on.
So from all that work, the county has its portion that it pays. So our county drain at large assessment that we pay every year is going up, right? Because of what Bob just described. It wasn't until Bob was here a couple of weeks ago at finance and with his chief deputy drain commissioner, Carolyn Shoemaker, who Carolyn made the comment, the counties never chose to pay up front for their drain assessment. And then she came back to me maybe the day later or something and said, oh, the county did once on the Cahoon.
The Cahoon drain, and I do not know why.
Whatever reason, I don't know when or why or what.
The one that out here on Crawford Road that kind of serves that subdivision, Copper Estates.
Okay.
That for some reason the county paid that one off.
Excellent.
It's right in the middle of a whole bunch of large ones like that.
So it got me thinking, why do you prepay? Well, you prepay to save interest, right?
Yep.
And how do you do that? You do that if you have the money up front to do it, right? You pay yourself instead of paying somebody else the interest. So I contacted Carolyn and Bob and said, so the drain at large that we have, can we now choose, even though it's after the fact, can we choose to pay those off at any time? Yes, you can. So Carolyn printed off all of the drains that we still owe on. Our intern, Destiny, put it into the spreadsheet that you have before you. Basically, all of these are drains along the left that make up our county drain at large. Plus, there's annual maintenance too that we pay on top of these. We broke it down each year by principal and interest so that we could see. This goes out to 2040, I believe. That's probably the mission.
Yep,
Mission.
2040.
So not all of these drains go out that long, right? Usually they're 20-year assessments. Some of
We
them
can actually go
we've been
30
paying
years
on a
now
while.
if we have to. We don't have it yet, but.
Right, well, that might be, I could see that being necessary, maybe on some future ones where the costs are really great, right? So these are just all of the drains that make up our county drain at large assessment currently, and their terms, right? How, when are we gonna have them paid off? And that's, as you flip through here, you'll see them all eventually drop off. But the story I wanted to bring to finance and talk to you about is that it looks like we've got about $2.8 million in principal we're gonna pay over the next 18 years. 17 now. And the interest attributed to that is about $800,000. So what I feel like is if we could spend 2.8 right now, it would save us $800,000 over the next 17 years. To me, if it was my money, I would look at doing that. I don't have 2.8 million to save 800,000 personally, but the county could, right? And later on in the agenda, we'll talk about ARPA dollars. And we'll talk about how much ARPA dollars is left, how much ARPA dollars could be recognized in our general fund. So I don't want you to sit there like, Nicole, we don't have any cash to do this. We don't have any cash today, but if we recognize those ARPA dollars, we could have, and we could send it. Now, what I understand from the Drain Commission is there's no hurry to do this. As long as it's done before September, I believe, of this year.
Get them in before the end of September, because that keeps us straight on the next year's interest.
Yes. So it's nothing that needs to be decided today. Bob, I thank you very much for coming up to join the discussion because it's been very helpful. I just wanted to plant this seed. It's an opportunity. The county rarely pays up front for these things. I don't understand why we haven't, because generally we would have this.
I'm curious to why they stopped. I think they used to always pay them off, and they must have stopped and just started making the payments by the looks of this.
So this blue line totals, is that the annual at large for the county?
No, so you would add those together. So like for the 2023 principal and 2023 interest, so you'd add those first two
okay.
columns up.
I see.
But then plus you'd have what Bob is talking about for maintenance costs. We pay a portion of the annual maintenance that happens on drains other than.
Roles are the same for these as they are for maintenance. Like hire Bruce Starr or whoever to go out and fix a drain. You still have that percent, it's all percentages. Your at large is a percentage rate on the drain.
So it is the county's percentage and that's constant.
Every drain is different. Every drain is different. It depends.
Because of the topography, because of the
right.
soils.
If a drain does a lot of road drainage or municipality drainage or anything like that, that affects it. If the drain doesn't hardly do anything for the county, actually, to the road commissioner, the roads or anything like that, then it does. But you always have your assessment factor of what the land value.
So the county's
affects that.
Assumes that there's a general public benefit. And the same thing would be if you have railroads going through there or township property or. Okay, what's the interest rate?
It depends on our financing when we get them. I believe the last one's been running just under 3 right around. But that's going up now too.
But that's not gonna go up. These payments are set.
No, these are set in stone.
If you did any
I've
more
got another
bond
one,
issuance.
actually 2 drains probably coming up in the next year or so. So, and we'll see. The interest rates are going up.
Okay. Well, it certainly is worth looking into it. I mean, if we can have that much of a savings and then if we take care of our draw on an annual basis, that's maybe a couple $300,000 that we'd have for jail bond financing.
Exactly. We can definitely build it into the forecast that way.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm looking at. Okay, so let's say hypothetically, we pay the 2.8 mil, right? What is gonna be our savings each year? Do we have anything that shows us what that's going to be over the next, I guess it's over 18 years, that we'd be saving interest for over 18 years?
We can estimate it.
Well, I can give you the actual I've got a copy for every drain right here. That's, what's the name of that drain?
This one's a
For the
bachelor,
Batch Elder.
batch elder.
That's the one that goes right by Maury Charter School.
That's what this is made up of,
Yep.
all of those sheets.
Okay,
This actually, you can.
And we're just breaking out the principal and interest.
okay, so hang on.
I've got one for one
So
of these.
each year, this is what we would save if we paid it off. So it's 105, 96,
Yes, sir.
90. So that would be the interest that we would save.
Yes.
We would,
yeah.
and then we would also save on the principal payment because we would be
Interest,
making that anyway.
Right, and the reason I say we could estimate the savings on the principal is we don't know that normal cost, if you will, ongoing cost of what the maintenance is gonna be.
Yeah, see that. would-
This isn't our only
Mhm.
payment to the drains.
Right.
It's that maintenance too, which we could probably extrapolate that out
maintenance
though.
is
And
Totally separate from.
right, that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
that's the point she's making.
Here's my point I'm gonna make about your maintenance. You'll never get maintenance on these while they're assessed, because when you finance it, you actually take a 10% contingency. That pays for your maintenance or any other legal
Over the life of
on the
it.
drain while it's assessed. That's the problem I'm having, just so everybody figures this out with that little tobacco deal. Before I got here, and I'm not, the decision was made that we were at 30% of the total and Clare County was at 70% for the total of that project. Well, but what we didn't do is combine the little tobacco drain with the Duncan drain, which is the drainage district. Actually, we're paying 30% of that project and 75% of the drainage district is in Isabella County. We only paid 30% of the project, but we didn't do any work in Isabella County. All the work was done in Clare County. That's why their percent was way higher. And it sounds like a great deal. It saved, saved
But we
us
got
an
benefit
$11 million
of the work.
project. And we would have been on the hook for, 75%, but plus the project would have been more than 11, probably would have been 15 million. And we would have been on for 70% of that rather than 30% of 11. Saved us a ton of money. The only problem I got is I can't touch the contingency money. So anything we do on that drain for the next 20 years while it's assessed has to be assessed on top of the people's yearly assessment.
Over and above.
It just doesn't,
But
it doesn't, I get a lot of phone calls. That's what makes your phone.
Yeah, you're not gonna make friends doing that.
And we've got Mr. Fair Salvage. It's got a culvert washed out or with a 5-ton limit on it west of his thing, and one more completely washed out with the road closed around the corner of Crawford Road. So the only route in and out of Fair Salvage is Grass Lake to Mission. Can't, well, and then you could go south on Lincoln, but that road is terrible. It's the only way in and out of it, and he's paying this humongous assessment, and we can't. Great, we can't do anything about those cross culverts. That's gonna be the road commission's gonna fix them. They're technically theirs anyway. But had they been in the Duncan drain been included in that project, we could have replaced all those culverts in the, in part of the project. So that was our savings. But now we're paying for our savings.
Coming back around to get us.
Bob, you mentioned a road commission. Do they pay a drain at large assessment here in Isabella County?
That's part of yours.
Thank you.
That's the county at large is. And that's part of your at large assessment is, grading, road grading. The other part is land value. An area that drains, but obviously worth a lot more money, higher tax rate than a swamp.
Thank you.
So we do provide some support to the road commission then
Yes,
out of
we
our
do.
general fund.
Yes, we do.
So we have
I have a question.
Little say there.
Talking about the Batchelder drain
Yeah.
by the CRC, Cultural Recreation, well, by the Maury Courts.
So
So,
it's not Maury Courts, Maury Charter School.
oh, Maury
That's
Charter
the one
School,
up
it's
that
out
way.
that way, okay,
Blanchard.
Couple Blanchard, yeah.
okay. I don't have a question then.
You have a drain out there, but Maury.
I
Courts,
know,
that's,
so, let's say, I don't know what that drain is, but when the county
Yeah.
purchased the property, we just assumed that drain assessment from the prior owner plus our at-large. So keep everything on level.
Yeah, that one should be done, about done, if it's not done. That very assessment.
Excellent. Well, you can see, you can see the system, you can see them falling off as they should.
Well, we're gonna be talking about ARPA funds a little bit later, but I know there's other things that come into play, and that is being able to be fiscally solvent until our new property taxes come in and be able to handle the budget. You'll have all those answers for us, but I
Every
certainly
single
think
one.
this is worth looking at.
Good,
It
good.
doesn't seem like it has a downside.
I
Yeah, I
can't
was gonna
see
say,
one.
is there another side of this we're not aware of?
Sometimes I have a tendency to oversimplify things, and then that's why I like to bring it up and talk in the group discussion, but Melissa and I will build it into the forecast then so you can see, here it is with, if we do it, here it is without.
And the only other impacts is if we were going to use any of the funds for MERS, but that's why we hired you. You get the big bucks to help us with those decisions.
Exactly. But you're exactly right,
Yeah.
Chairman. It's all about that, the cash we have available and
How to use
where's
it
our
to
bang
advantage.
for our buck.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you, Bob. Super valuable to have your knowledge at the table.
Are you done with me?
I don't think you have anything else on the agenda today, so
We're good.
hopefully I'll never be done with you. It's a bad connotation. Thank you.
I'll be downstairs if you have any questions.
That sounds good.
Thank you very much. Tim is coming up with the sound study if you want to hear that again.
The what? Those things do make noise.
Yeah, yeah, nobody contested that they didn't. How much do they make?
Yep.
And like just like depends on the weather, the wind, what, the breeze, everything.
Direction it's coming from.
I was saying, I've never, my hearing's terrible, so I hadn't heard. It's out by one, but that drain project. Ooh.
Say that again, my hearing aids, I got.
Yeah, and I have no hearing aid. See you later.
Thank you, Bob.
I brought him a copy. I brought a copy for Chairman Hope that he's not been here
Yeah,
today.
you might
so-
have to do this one more
Yeah.
time
so-
then.
And that's fine, but there's a copy for him anyhow. So, well, I'm happy to come to the conclusion of losing my voice today by talking so much about this. So this is our post-construction sound study. So as I've done with the other two committees this morning, I'll kind of back up. I know some of you stopped in and you've heard little bits and pieces, but this is the post-construction sound study that's required by ordinance. It's not something that all communities do, but it is something with the co-project. It was not part of the co-project in township ordinance. We did think it was important to ensure our community and our citizens that not only can they model up front, but we can prove their model at the end that it is in compliance. So Article 12, which is our special land use section of our ordinance, 1205 QQ 28 is a requirement for post-construction sound study to be completed by community development with the assistance of a third-party administrator, being a sound expert. The Planning Commission selects that group. They selected RSG a little over a year and a half ago to do that work for us. And the project cost was over $150,000, which was not paid for by the taxpayers, but was paid for by the applicant. Set money up in escrow. We had that money to pay for it. We actually initially only had $100,000. We had to go back to DTE September-ish of last year and secure another $60-some thousand that we thought was going to take us to get through the project. Article 12, again, section 1205 QQ 16 is the standard in the ordinance for the maximum sound level, maximum decibel level at 50 dB. At an L50 requirement is what the standard is set by ordinance. So RSG was hired to basically come in and set up shop and get us results in 14 locations at 14 sites. We do have 136 turbines total, 383 megawatts of power produced at maximum potential there. If you want to turn to, you can turn to, or I can turn to it, and you can kind of maybe hear this in the notes later. The executive summary is the first place I'd like to jump to within the document. Goes over much of the stuff I just said. 136 turbines, commercial operations was in June of 21. 383 megawatts of power is produced. 50 dBs is our requirement. RSG was the company that was hired to do it. 14 sites were selected. We did both attended and unattended monitoring, meaning we had somebody sitting with the equipment, and then there were periods where we had nobody sitting with the equipment. The last sentence in the executive summary states the results of this sound monitoring indicate that project sound levels at each site were below the 50 dB L50, which shows us compliance with the ordinance. I'm going to jump up a little bit further. There's a bunch of other methodology and stuff, and I'm not going to get through the methodology. You can read through it if you have questions. It's just some of it is scientific for the engineering group. Some of it was how we selected the sites. We can talk a little bit about that at the end. But if you look at page 4, there's a map, shows the project area, shows all the turbine locations, and it shows the monitoring sites. One of the things we did when selecting those 14 sites were to ensure that we had good coverage throughout the entire park.
The map really brings it home.
Yeah, it's a little hard to see because it's so small, but it really does bring it home that we got the whole area. And there was representation in every one of the townships that had turbines in it. So we made sure Denver and Nottawa and Gilmore and so on all had testing sites within. The next area I'm going to jump to is a few pages down, page 13. Page 13 is the results. There's 3 tables in this section. Again, right above table 1 is a statement in the very sentence right above it that says, as shown in the last column of table 3, which we'll get to, the highest measured L50 is 49 dBA at site 5. The next highest measured L50 is 48 dBA, measured at sites 6 and 12. Just kind of summarizing that. Table 1 gives us all our monitoring periods, the dates in which they monitored, the times in which they monitored, whether it was attended or unattended. You can see the top 5 transactions there, rows are attended monitors. The bottom 3 were unattended. The sites which were monitored, and the sites that turned up valid data after monitoring. As you can see in the attended time frame, the weather just didn't cooperate with us. We only had one site, which was site 1, that got us valid data to be able to actually test and know that we had data that was there for them to be able to produce what that L50 was. All the rest of them came in the unattended monitoring periods, those last 3 periods. And again, it was same equipment set up, just nobody sitting there. Stuff was chained down to a spike in the ground, and they sat for 10 days. We still monitored the weather so that we knew when to shut turbines down so we could get just turbine noise, when to turn them back on. Was all scheduled via text and telephones and such. So most of our data collection came there in June, in July, and then again here in November of 22. The next table on page 14 is the monitoring locations and the affected turbines. So you have the sites 1 through 14 in the first column, the parcel ID or the location by parcel ID that they were in, the lat, long, and decimal degrees of the location of the monitoring equipment itself, and then the turbines that were affected. So on site 1, there was only 1 turbine that affected that noise. In turbine 5, which was our highest, or site 5, which was our highest dB level at 49, there were 14 different turbines that were providing impact to that noise. And I think when they made the determinations, it had to get, I believe it was 1 decibel or more. If it was less than 1 decibel in reading, then it didn't have an effect on it. Didn't produce any effect to it. It was typically probably a further distance away. So table 3, again, this is sort of the emphasis on the executive portion above where it shows compliance. This is our summary of our monitoring results. Again, got sites 1 through 14, the shutdown periods, the valid data periods, average turbines only at L50, and then the highest hourly L50. That's the column of concern, the highest hourly. All of those numbers fall underneath the 50 decibels at an L50, which puts them in compliance with our ordinance. Shutdown periods are basically periods where they're getting ambient noise. Turn the turbine off, turn the turbine back on so we can pick up ambient noise. So that's table 3, again, showing, providing us with some information that shows us compliance. Page 16, the conclusion. It's basically what I just told you, but the very last paragraph there, when the project wind turbines operated at or near highest sound emissions, the average L50 ranged from 39 dB to 49 dBA. The highest project only sound levels measured at these sites ranged from 44 to 49 dBA L50. So the 40 to 49 was the range that the testing sites came within, and they're all under the 50 requirement that we had. So when we talk about valid data that was collected, site 1 only showed 1 valid data set. Where, for example, site 2 showed 2 valid data sets, or site 6 showed 33 valid data sets. So they were able to gather 33 different data sets from that one site. So that average column you see here averages all those together. Really doesn't do us any good because we're not using that to average, but it gives us a good idea that we didn't have, you know, a really low number and a really high number, and we use some average to get there. Our highest is what we wanted because we can't go above that number, and that's what that last column does for us. It shows us the highest levels, and none of them were outside of that parameter. The next area I'm going to go to is Appendix B1. There's an Appendix A, B, C, and D. Appendix A is just a bunch of glossary for acoustic stuff that belongs with the engineers and not with me, but it's there. Appendix B is the monitoring site descriptions and results. So for every site, they took the worst case scenario. So in that one, I think it was 5, where we had 33 valid periods. They took the worst case scenario in site 5 and graphed it like this so we could see it. So in 1, it only had 1 period. It's graphed as a 1, or it's only graphed the one site, which was its worst case scenario. Basically, this tells us how far it is from the monitor is from the nearest turbine, which was 1,050 feet. It tells us the day the monitoring took place, tells us that is the worst case scenario. It tells us that there's other details provided in Appendix C, which we'll get to. And the very last sentence here, which is the same sentence structure with a different dB for each one of the sites, but it basically says the turbine only sound level for this period was 46 dBA L50 below the project threshold of 50 dBA L50. Again, showing us that we have compliance at site 1. It showed that number. Looking at the graph itself, it's a little it's easy to read once you understand it and you look at it for a while. At first glance, it's a lot of information there. The top has 2 different legends. The first legend shows the overall period of sound levels, and it shows our solid line at an L50 1 minute, a dash line at an L50 1 minute excluded, a background period at L50, a turbine plus background L50 at 1 hour, and a turbine only L50 at 1 hour. Then it shows exclusions in these circles for anomalies, precipitation, and wind gusts. If you look at the very top of the graph, there's some red dots across it. That's telling us during that time period, which is at the bottom of the graph, 1900 to 1940, we had a bunch of high wind gusts. So they excluded some of the data out because of it. That's what those dashed lines are that are kind of riding the roller coaster there. Those numbers weren't utilized in this calculation. But the big thing to look at is that 50 dB line on the left-hand column, straight across. Everything was underneath it anyhow, even the excluded data, with the exception of a single point that looks like it might be at 50 or just over 50. And the ordinance allows for wind events and storms and those things for us to climb a touch higher outside of, but come back within. You can see the shaded area on the left-hand side of the graph is our shutdown period. Obviously, the sound's going to drop way down in that shutdown period because we're trying to pick up ambient noise. On the left-hand, or I'm sorry, the right-hand side, yes, I said left, but I meant right. The other right-hand side, being the real right, there are some other dark dots up there. Those dots are anomalies, car going down the road. A neighbor came up and asked them what they were doing, and they would picked up voices and noise like that. So those anomalies got pulled out as well. So there is in Appendix B, 14 different sites, worst case scenario on every one of those sites, the same information. So I'm not going to go through each one of them. They're all in compliance. Page 2 shows the actual sound monitor and the picture of the sound monitor and the closest turbine. And then the third page of each one of these appendixes sites shows the turbine location with source photography, location of the site that's tied back to that lat long that I showed you in one of the earlier tables. And that is right up against a non-participating property line, because those are the areas we wanted to study, is where is our worst case potential for complaint, for noise violation type thing. With that being said, I don't think I mentioned earlier, there were 52 total areas of that were selected by the sound consultant of areas that we should consider looking into or sites to be selected. So 14 of those 52 were selected, and they were selected based on, some of them were closer on wetlands, some of them had other buildings that would noise would bounce off of those buildings and it wouldn't give us a good reading. So we really took a good representation of the project area, but we also did it of the project area of the most impactful based on the early model that we could, like right up against the property line. Obvious place you'd want to do it. If it's 100 feet away from a property line, it's less important than the one that model sitting right up against the property line. We want to know here. So that's Appendix B in a nutshell. Appendix C is the biggest section of the document because it's all the data. It starts on page C1. So it's where these end and the graphs start. It wasn't the best, I think, in this document, but. So on page C1, this is a detailed sound monitor results for valid periods. So as you remember, Site 5 had 33 valid periods. We have Site 5, we have 33 pages for Site 5 in here. Each page correlates to how many valid periods we had. Site 1 only had 1 period. So all of this data is for Site 1 for 1 period. Site 2 had 2 periods. So this is Site 2, and this is the other period in Site 2. What was graphed in B was the worst case of each one of those sites. Okay. So all of these are the same data is the point I'm trying to make. It's just, there's a lot of it there. So with this data in Appendix C, as stated, I believe in the top of each one of the sites in Appendix B is power output levels. So the turbine has to be at or near its maximum, or we're not going to get the highest sound out of it. We want the highest sound out of it. So we know we have to be operating at or near maximum capacity. To do so, we know we need to have certain winds up at the hub height. So we have to add certain winds up at the hub height. This basically lays the data out for the time period that it was attended or unattended and monitored by time for power output. So we know at this site, power output in Site 1, normal operations were 2349, these are kilowatts. per hour. They had to be above that. As you can see, those in green above it were above that, which put us at our maximum or close to our maximum. So therefore, that was the time period that was used to create the graph.
Valid data.
Valid data point, correct. The second chart or the second graph in the middle there is about wind speed. And again, if you just look at the wind speed based on what I said, the highest wind speed is going to be when the turbine's operating at its highest level. It's again that same period of time. We're looking at 12 to 13 meters per second of wind speed up there. The bottom one results graph or table shows us ground winds, maximum gusts that took place, number of minutes that were collected of valid data during 10-minute increments. And then again shows us valid data, yes, in green, and not valid data. And the blank data in the middle is during shutdown period. Again, that last column is that turbine only L50 reading. Again, we're looking for any of them to be over 50. None of them were over 50 in that period. They're all under the 50. The little box to the side there at the bottom states that the turbine only sound level is 46 dBA for 35 minutes in our testing period. So each one of the valid data sets has its own graph like this all the way through the entire, I don't remember the total number that we had of valid data points collected, 160 something maybe. There is a statement on there that certifies that this was done independently of both the owner, DTE, as well as the county. It was RSG's INCE board certified sound engineering expert that produced this for us. And so in the event that we have challenges or those types of things on noise and complaints on noise that are challenging and people don't believe this, that's why we hired an expert to go and do it, because he's going to be the guy sitting on the stand, you know, testifying to the fact that the park is in compliance with our ordinance. So that is the majority of this data. There's one more appendix at the very back of this, Appendix D. And it basically is just showing us our meteorological conditions for each of the valid monitoring periods. So we went out and we did monitoring. We needed to make sure temperatures were in a range. So they got the temperature data there, they got the relative humidity data there, and they got the 10-meter wind speeds there for us to utilize, or for them to utilize, to know that it's a valid period and we met those other conditions. So that's it in a nutshell. I think I feel like it got a little shorter for each one of these, and I apologize if I missed something from earlier.
It's hard.
But we are satisfied that the report has come out to say we're in compliance with the ordinance, to the point that this project is closed and moved into a enforcement monitoring type of a status versus still a compliance with permitting side. So the permitting compliance is complete. All the conditions have been met. All the requirements of the ordinance have been met. Our consultant has provided us with a letter stating that, basically, as well as our sound study has come back to tell us that we're in compliance with regard to sound.
I got a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
Who decided the 50 decibels?
Who decided the 50
Who made that-
decibels?
Who made that decision?
50 decibels was something that was, we initially established our ordinance for wind back 2008, 9, 10-ish. And it was using a model that was provided to us through MSU Extension at the time, as well as other ordinances in other language that we could find that was happening. For example, Alma was in place. We knew what was happening down there. We knew those levels down there that they were looking at. Was there lots of discussion? Boy, we had full house meetings about where we should be and what levels should be and how they should be. But ultimately that moved through the Planning Commission recommendation and was approved by the county board to establish it at 50.
What does 50 decibels sound like?
They gave us a reference. Your refrigerator running in your house is like 44 or 46 decibels.
My dishwasher runs a little higher than that.
Probably a little high, depends. I got a really noisy one. Mine probably runs a lot higher than my last one, but yes.
Mom's is ancient.
Yes, but it's such a different thing when somebody asks you that, to go and stand next to your refrigerator tonight and listen to it for a little bit when it's dead quiet, and then go stand out there and listen to it. You'll tell yourself, no way are these things close. No way are they close. So it's really a hard thing to compare it to something else, in my opinion. they provided, when we were going through it, I remember being provided like with this graph of basically, refrigerator running is this, jet engine was way over here at this going overhead, 70, 80, 90 decibels. A stadium, a football.
Arrowhead Stadium.
Was that what it was?
114.
Yeah. So,
115, yeah.
it's all, there's some relevancy to that and what you're hearing in stuff. I will say, and I didn't say it again in this one, my understanding, the logarithmic equation that gets you from a 48 to a 49.
It's not linear.
No, not at all.
Algorithmic,
It's,
which
yes,
is kind of
exactly.
like
So it's
this,
there's a longer spread between there than most non-scientific people who are just looking at numbers believe. Have I seen ordinances that are lower than that? I have over the years. Have I seen ordinances that are higher than that? I have over the years. When we moved into the 50 and kept ourselves at 50, I think the planning commission was solidly supportive of that based on what was happening at that time.
Mhm.
And the board obviously was too in approving and adopting that language.
Where do we stand at the moment on complaints? Any?
We,
None
we-
have bubbled to me, which
So,
is a
so we have
fantastic-
had since June of, I would have to double check this, but we have had since June of 21, when they became commercially operational, I think 3. 2 of them were from people who were involved the entire process. They just didn't want turbines. They think it's a lot noisier than what it is. And we have taken a look at it. We've shared with DTE. DTE's went to their homes as addressed. DTE's taken some hand numbers, but this has given us some numbers that tells us compliance now. One individual continues, and we've had continuous complaints. We told him we needed to hear this. DTE worked with that turbine that was closest to him to cut the power down to 50%. So they weren't producing high levels till we got the wind study done so that we could make sure that we were there, being good neighbors, trying to do a neighborly thing. We studied, there was a monitor set up to his property owner to the north. So closer to the turbine, and it complies. So him being further away, it's going to put him in compliance. I suspect he may be one of the individuals that are just very sensitive to these noises. Some people are more sensitive to noise than other people
And if
are.
he was against it from the get-go.
Well, he wasn't. He
Oh,
was
that's-
not one of those.
oh, okay.
So taking
The others-
of the 3, the other 2
the
were.
two were.
Yes, so taking him out, we did just respond to him the other day. He did ask for a copy of the sound study. We told him the sound study's completed. It's the property owner to the north of you. It's a little closer. I think he was almost a quarter mile. This one was like, where we studied was like just over 1,080 or something like that feet. So he's a couple hundred feet away from where that was. But we did go out to his property early on with just my telephone, my work telephone, Ray in my office's work telephone, so we could have some different numbers with some free dB readers, not pulling out ambient because you got to pull that out. Most people don't understand that, but just getting levels. We were south of him, probably 200 feet from his home, just south of him, which is further from the closest turbine. And we were pulling like 46s and 48s on our phones.
With background.
With
Yeah,
background, but we don't know what level the wind was running, so it's not scientific. So
Yeah.
we were doing it just to go,
Just
if
to get an
this
idea.
reading comes in at 90, we probably got some issues going on out here.
You can anticipate
Yes,
problems at that
exactly.
point, but you weren't getting that.
Weren't getting
Yeah.
it. So I suspect he's going to continue to be a complaint. I believe he probably sits within your district, I believe.
Sherman?
No, not Ottawa.
Nope, not us. That would be
No, it's
Mr.
Hutchinson.
Engel.
Oh,
Mr.
yeah,
Engler.
that's Frank's district. That's right.
No, that's
No.
Hutchinson.
Oh,
That's
Hutchinson.
Hutchinson.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's right.
Hutchinson, yep. So yeah, so he sits within that district. I don't know that we receive necessarily all the complaints, I would say, though. Some of them are going right to DTE. I mean, DTE has produced a telephone number, like a hotline for complaints, for people to complain. DTE notifies us when there is a blade issue that's causing a whistle. They did it here not too long ago while we were studying. Unfortunately, it was in one of the turbines we thought that impacted our study. And I'm thinking, like, here we got, these guys in town for $30,000 and we got a blade bad. I got to go hear this. I got to go hear it myself. We drove around and couldn't even hear it. The whistle itself. We were sort of making it up. Like, yeah, I think there it was. We just couldn't
Couldn't really
identify
tell.
it, hear it. It did happen to have less than 0.01 effect, that turbine had less than 0.01 dB effect on the location. So the sound monitoring people said, it doesn't matter. If we have that in here, it's not going to change us in any fashion that's going to show different. And I think that site came up at like 47. So even, you know, even with it, it was not going to be there. So DTE's been a good neighbor to us in response of letting us know when they're receiving a complaint, let us know what they're working out, and
Stay
what
out
types
ahead-
of things.
Stay ahead of it, yeah.
It's the good neighbor thing to do. These things are
Mhm.
not, I say nobody likes these things. A lot of people don't like these things. DTE and any other company coming in to put them in a community needs to stay on with the community, needs to make sure that the community is their thoughts within what changes or modifications or things that they do there. So we've built a good relationship there. We are closed with the project now, so I don't know if they operate any differently with regard to us, but I would doubt it. Time will tell how neighborly they continue to be here. They're looking at solar down the road. I know they need other approvals to do some of those other things. I really think they're going to be neighborly. It's just people are not going to.
The last thing I
Like
want to do is burn a bridge.
Yes,
if they're looking for
exactly,
something else down the
exactly.
road.
So I do think that there are people out there that think DTE is, you know, the worst in the world and they're just, you know, pulling one over on us. I don't have that feeling. I have not had that feeling through this entire project. I've had my own hiccups with the company when we were going through the production process and permitting process, where they weren't getting us stuff and we were wanting stuff and this didn't work. And it's been a long process. 2015 started, just closed out like last week. So it's been a long time coming, but I feel we got what our ordinance allowed for, and a good neighbor at it as well. I really do feel that.
No, win-win.
Yep.
That's all I have.
I know it's a lot of information too, so if anything comes up tomorrow, you know, probably take you 50 times to read it before you fall asleep to it, but at whatever point, feel free to come back. The reason I wanted to go to all committees, and I addressed Nicole with it. I heard your discussion at the last meeting saying Tim had said he would bring it back. That was the day while I was watching, I was literally receiving the final report and reviewing it. So I went to Nicole the next morning for my zoning board of appeals
Appreciate
meeting and
that.
said, I want to go to all committees and make sure we have a little bit more of an intimate versus, you know, the big group. Let everybody get their questions out. And so beyond, just contact me. Let me know if you have any questions.
So we're not gonna have this at the work session or anything, but maybe catch up Chairman Hope on the.
Yes,
report.
I would
Yeah.
ask that you reach out to him.
Yeah.
And get him that maybe make a time that
Yep.
works for both of you. Or he may just want to receive that. You could put it in his box.
Yeah, that's why I gave
And
Jessica
then
a copy
contact
for
him to
that
say,
purpose.
hey,
Yep.
if you want, because Chairman Hope, even though he didn't attend, he will watch every one of these
Yeah.
committee meetings. So I know he'll hear it 3 times.
Yep.
But he'll probably reach out to you. if he's-
Yeah, and I don't have, you know, like my intentions were is to make sure that each one of you had the ample amount of time in a more intimate setting than a board setting. So,
Appreciate it.
yep, not a problem.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Yes, you're welcome. Have a good day.
You as well.
I learned one thing. I should ask my questions before Chris asks his because he preempted me.
Like-minded, that's.
The same 2 questions I had.
It's good.
Nicole, I have one extra copy that I made, if you just want to keep it up and add.
We'd love to, yeah. I
Um,
can see maybe somebody requesting that after all the discussion this morning, so
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, the next item is consider approving the agreement addendum to the current affiliation agreement with Central Michigan University Board of Trustees through December 31st, 2026 to add the Isabella County Public Defender's Office to Exhibit B as an Isabella County Department's covered location and authorize the board chair to sign the same. So we get students from the university in a lot of different capacities. I know as Parks and Recreation, we had interns from the RPL department. And sometimes the interns would be non-paid, sometimes they'd be paid. So if we have a department that's seeking an intern, do they work through administration or go directly to the university?
They generally go directly to the university.
Okay.
Mhm.
And I know as Parks and Recreation Director, in fact, it was here in this county that we had put somebody on a per diem or something. But found out when we had to pay unemployment that it is a employee considered contractual relationship. And so I was interested to see how this agreement handled that, where it says you can basically do it as a non-employee, no compensation, no benefits.
Right.
Or you do have the option to provide a pay, and also you have all the other responsibilities with it.
When we have a paid internship, we don't pay them through payroll. Traditionally, that the best practice is, and we try now, we don't pay them through payroll, we pay them through accounts payable. So it's unfortunate for the intern, right? Because then they have to handle their taxes, yes. But we do that purposefully so that it doesn't trigger that relationship. But I hadn't thought about workers' comp at all.
Yeah,
Honestly, I
that
hadn't, it hadn't triggered, but that's an important distinction to make.
Yeah, employment benefit. Well,
Yeah.
what I did, what I thought I would do in Clinton County, and I did check with the Department of Labor, Michigan Department of Labor, to make sure that it would float, is that we'd have a contractual relationship, that the employee was not an employee of
Yeah.
the county, but that the county was going to give a direct payment to that student's educational fund. And we were told that would not be an employment relationship. And so that was all spelled out in the contract we had with the intern. So the intern did get some compensation, but it wasn't to the intern, it was to the university.
On
Put into that
behalf of-
Very
student's account.
beneficial, yeah.
Yeah.
Very beneficial.
Anyhow,
So,
I'm thinking this is great for all the departments to have this as a resource.
it is, and we want it to be a resource for public defender's office as well, right? It just was a timing thing when we entered the agreement. Public defender's office didn't exist, or maybe it was too new to think about adding it to the exhibit on the back, but public defender's office is in a position where they'd like to have an internship with CMU, and they're not on the list, so we just need to add them to exhibit B, so pretty straightforward.
Chris, did you have any
No,
questions on the,
seemed pretty straightforward.
it's like an easy addendum?
Yep.
So we need to have a motion. I'll make the motion to consider approving the agreement addendum, moving to the work session for discussion. Support. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. That moves forward.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Now we get to item number 7, American Rescue Plan Act funds discussion.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that you were both aware, thank you, of, I thought there was a little thing on the paper, but it's actually, must be on the copier, this is on every one of them, interesting. I don't know if you want to see this too, I don't know what's on there, but. Tim, there's extra too, would you like to see one since you're,
No, I just came back to clarify something.
okay, very good.
Should I do that now?
It's fine, one. So with regard to your question, the whole way downstairs, I was going, how did we come up with the 50? I know we went there. Actually, the 50 dB level was changed in 2017. In 2008, when we used the models from MSU Extension, it was a 55 decibel reading. So we actually, in 2017, we made 4 or 5 amendments to the ordinance, and that was one of them, where we made it more strict. Yeah, so we made it more restrictive in 2017, that brought it to 50. And that was a recommendation that came specifically out of our planning commission. So I knew it was there, I just couldn't remember, I was thinking we were at 55 at one point, and I couldn't get it, so I ran and grabbed the document real quick. I just want to make sure I got that
Appreciate that.
clarified. Yep, you're
I
welcome.
like the idea of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, it's perfect
It's good,
timing.
good to know.
Thank you for your
Yeah.
patience.
And good information to know. No, I love clarifying information. So that's why we're here talking about ARPA funds. So I know it was a comment one of the commissioners made to me the other day that I thought, I need to do a better job of explaining ARPA dollars and how much we got and where it's at. And I want to have this conversation with you so you can help me explain it to others if need be. So at the top, ARPA funds that we were granted, just over 13.5 million. We think of that 13.5 million in two buckets because federal government told us of our allocation, we can take 10 million off the top. And that 10 million is it was for lost revenue through the coronavirus pandemic. How we take that off the top, if you will, is we recognize it, we spend it on things that any governmental services, right? General public services, we talk about payroll is probably one of the easiest things to spend that kind of money on because our payroll is for general fund is well over $10 million a year. So we could, when it comes time, when we know what we're going to do with ARPA dollars and we have until the end of 2024 to obligate the funds, we can recognize those dollars simply by saying we're gonna spend them on likely thing is payroll. Once we say that on our books, those ARPA dollars get recognized as revenue to the general fund. Right now, they're not in. We don't know what we're doing with them. They haven't been recognized. They're still ARPA dollars. The treasurer is able to invest them and earn interest, which is exciting, but they don't even come into our cash pool right now, right? They're invested and they're kind of off to the side.
Obligate in order to recognize. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. So once we have those, once we recognize them as payroll, right? And we say, okay, and we report to ARPA, we spent our lost revenue dollars on payroll. Then that becomes general fund revenue, right? General fund balance, because in our budget, we would have said, we're going to use all these tax revenues to pay wages. And if we come up down and say, ARPA is going to pay for payroll, then you can see how we haven't spent what we budgeted. So our fund balance is going to increase there. We have said throughout time in fiscal 21, we used just over $1 million of that standard allowance in our budget to balance the budget. In 22, we used it on some capital projects, a roof, a server, phone system. All of those things, when all those things are paid for, I think the phone system is still an estimate. Not everything has come through on that. We're left with 8.6 million of that 10. Pretty good. If you remember, we were going to, in fiscal 22, use 1.6 million of ARPA for payroll to balance the budget, and we didn't have to do that. You're going to soon see your report on fiscal 22. That would have taken it down to 7 million available. We worked really hard. At the time we were talking about sending 8 million to MERS, and so we really worked hard to say, okay, if we don't have to spend it, let's keep it in this pool. All this stuff we're talking about, paying forward on the county drain at large, cash flow for the jail project. That is the manna from heaven, right? That 8.6 million. I don't know how we would do those kind of projects, even consider them without it. So I want to give you the comfort to know this is what we spend some of that 10 million on, but 8.6 is still there. Okay. And it's not in our general fund because we haven't recognized it yet. Now the leftover, the 3.5 million, if it's not lost revenue, then it's direct costs, right? The Fed said you can use it on infrastructure, you can use it for, to make payments to employees, you reimburse COVID expenditures, this kind of thing. So this spells out what we spent it on in 21, a lot of COVID expenditures, masks and gloves and sanitizer and all that stuff. 22, so email exchange server. The senior assistant PA position has always been funded through ARPA. Some other IT stuff, reimburse COVID expenditures. Again, that's the sanitizer, the mask, the gloves, that type of thing. You can see in 23, we've budgeted to pay the global essential pay, which was paid in October, and we're continuing to fund that senior assistant PA position. And that's through what's been spent first quarter. So our balance is 3.2 million, and then moving into what we have yet planned for fiscal 23 in the budget AV upgrades to the board chambers, the wage study, Cowater Lake Family Park Sewer Project, additional funding for that senior assistant PA, or continued funding of that position, I should say. The foreclosure prevention program that the treasurer brought forward, and we're bringing forward, pre-approved last year was the Lake Isabella water system well rehab of well 2. It didn't get done. We're moving that forward. Well number 1 was presented to the ARPA committee. That did not get approved for ARPA funding, or forwarded or recommended for ARPA funding, but that well number 2 still was on the books from, I think, fiscal 21 maybe originally. It's been a while, but just talked to Bob this morning. The money's there with this 32,000 and what they have in the water supply system. They are going to move ahead with well number 2, which is the critical one. So not going to be doing both of them, but still, even after all of that, that's planned for fiscal 23, we've still got 2.4 million of ARPA funds left of those direct costs, not to be spent on general public services, but to be spent on those specific things that the rules have always told us we can spend ARPA dollars on. HVAC system for this building, right? And that's another reason I wanted to show this to you, so that you had the comfort in knowing, yes, that the money is still there for the HVAC project here in this facility when we move forward, not if, but when.
Doesn't matter when.
And then the important note down below talks about we've got to decide what to do with these monies by December 31st of 2024. And we actually have to spend them by December 31st of 2026. But spending them can be, spending 8.6 on payroll and recognizing it in our general fund. We don't have to then go spend that 8.6
Right then.
by December of 2026.
As long as you're in the process of.
Recognizing it as revenue would be spending that lost revenue,
I see what
basically.
you're saying, okay.
Mhm. So really, no questions, no action, just, it's been a while since we talked about ARPA. And again, one question I got from somebody, I thought, boy, we really need to revisit this so that we
Clarify
know.
it.
Just didn't clarify it. In the back of my mind, I kind of thought, well, we still have about the 8 million. 8.6 is even better.
It is.
And I didn't know what the final figure was on the direct
Correct.
costs that we had left, which is good, because you think about the HVAC system for this building, it's something I think we're gonna have to do, because we're not gonna have money in the future. It's an opportunity to do it now, but
Yeah, and this is completely an off topic from ARPA dollars, but maybe along the same vein of funding. I know there's a lot of federal dollars available right now for infrastructure.
Get our hands on it.
I got an email from Heaven the other day. MCOG, our East Michigan Council of Governments, emailed me and said they're starting a pilot program with Michigan State University, where Michigan State University students partner with local governments and nonprofits to write grants
I saw that.
when
Yeah.
when the local governments don't have time or staff or resources to write these grants, but the, MSU students, fabulous resource. So we, Jake Borton, I reached out to department heads, and Jake Borton came back to say, hey, throw this in the hat. And we also, basically, I'm sorry, I'll back up. They had a call for papers, if you will, a call for, hey, who's going out for a grant? What grant are you going for? Maybe we can put it in this pilot program. So
Mhm.
we put in for, of course, improvements at the MRF, and also HVAC system for this building. So, hey, if we cannot spend this 2 million on the HVAC system, fantastic.
Pull from another
If there's
bucket.
another bucket out there. Also makes me think about the well at Lake Isabella Water
Sure, that's
Supply
another
and
one,
all the
yeah.
infrastructure dollars that are available out there right now. So I know the Dreen office is checking with the Rural Water Association to
There
see
should
if
be-
there might be some opportunities out there.
There should be
So,
some monies available for them, for the drains.
absolutely, absolutely. And they don't have to write the grant. We've done this when Jake had the, remember we had the container grant through Eagle a few years ago, where we bought the state helped us buy new recycling containers. Yes. And we didn't write that grant. We hired Spicer engineering and, paid them
Hmm.
a little bit and they wrote that grant, so.
Hmm.
Doesn't,
Well, there's so many things we can use this money for. I mean, what are we gonna do with the old jail? Is there a way of using some of the funds and bringing in some quick revenues? Is that the best route to go? Or,
Yeah,
what are we
what's
gonna
the
do with the
best route?
MRF? Keep plugging in 300,000, 400,000. Guess we're looking for recommendations. You running out of time. You still have a year?
TikTok,
Years?
yes. Yeah, I would say a year from now, we want to have a darn good idea. What we're gonna spend these on, a year and a half, we need to solidify it.
Okay.
So not a big rush, but still, we need to.
I think working through that forecast, we're being more and more honest with ourselves about what should be involved in that forecast and.
So is this information you're gonna share with, at the work session? Or are you just doing it with the finance administration?
Just done it at finance right now, but if you would like to bring it forward to the full board, we can include this spreadsheet in the packet for the full board meeting and just again, have it as a discussion, but just have
Yeah.
the same discussion at work sessions. So they
I
all
found
know.
it informative and
Very.
interested in.
I'm sure they're getting questioned about it. What did you do with your ARPA money? Well, we
Yeah.
still have most of it.
Right, and like I said, this helps us when we go out to our districts and say, hey, what's going on with all
Be
this? money you
ready,
got?
they're gonna want that.
Exactly.
But Melissa and I are gonna do you a good job of showing you why we need it.
So yeah, I like this idea of bringing it to the board and just having a quick review and, I don't know how often we should do this. Because obviously we've got year and a half before we have to make a decision, but periodically we should revisit this on a regular basis. My thought too would be have some kind of brainstorming session where we get all the commissioners together and we just have a conversation about what to do. What are our options and what are our priorities?
You did it again on me.
Sorry, sir. I
It should have been
apologize.
at the approval of the agenda, but it came into mind later.
Behaving too well in here, just way too well.
He's cutting me a lot of slack.
Well, there were two things I was gonna eventually bring up after everybody quit talking. One is we need to have this goal setting session.
Yes, sir.
I think everybody found that valuable last year and I think do it again. And I mean, we have some things to discuss, so that might
Yes.
give you some direction too.
That would be a really good idea.
I like that.
Mhm.
And then the other concern I have is, I've always felt that for the last couple of years, we're playing the shell game because we're running out of operational dollars and we're moving monies around to remain solvent.
Mhm.
And I didn't always agree with some of those actions. How we set this year? I mean, do we have funds to
For
be
cash flow,
for cash flow?
we are still sitting very good. Usually cash flow becomes a problem for us in late spring. We go,
April,
Around.
May?
you got it. May, June gets
Why is
really tight because we start our fiscal year in October. So we go through first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and
gets a little
now
interesting.
we send out our summer tax bill that has the county operating levy. Now, in the final quarter, our revenues start to come in. The bulk of our revenues, right?
Mhm.
Taxes are over half of our general fund revenues,
Okay.
but those don't come in until you don't pay your tax bill on July 2nd. So they do start trickling in, in July, but the locals accept those taxes and then they will come in and settle with the treasurer, the county treasurer, usually twice a month. So it's not until mid-July that we even start to see that operating levy come into our coffers. if
So you're
you
saying
will.
end of May, June is where things get a little tight
Real
around?
tight, yeah, for
Yeah.
cash flow, sure,
Okay.
because all our operating dollars are.
Mhm.
oh,
They're out and waiting for new to come in. Okay.
yes.
So you're able to use fund balance to tie that over, right? Or
If it's cash,
if it's cash.
fund balance and cash are two different things.
Mhm.
Right? In June of this year, when cash gets really tight, we're still gonna have a really nice fund balance, right? Fund balance is still gonna be very healthy. But the cash
Cash
will
is-
all have been spent.
So I know a number of counties address this by short-term loans. is that something you see we're gonna have to do in the near future as we move on this jail project and start having to?
I don't in the near future, but I think it's all part of that discussion, right? Right now, the ARPA dollars, even if we can recognize some of the, those lost revenues, those especially will help us with our cash flow problem.
Because we do have a dedicated fund, I don't know if that's the correct terminology, assigned dollars to cash flow fund of what,
We-
2 million?
You're talking for the jail project?
No, just money
Of
set aside
working
by the board.
capital. Yes,
working
I
capital.
think it's exactly 2 million in working capital.
Whether or not that should be increased. But then it's not really dedicated, right? It just it's a set aside by the
Just
county,
for operations.
by administration, or
Well.
is it the board?
Actually, administration assigns it. The board could commit it to where it would take board action to undo it. That makes sense.
So maybe just one other thing to
Think
think about
about
in all
In
this.
that
to
goal
raise
setting, yeah.
that level enough to where we're not having to borrow money. Correct, that's what you're saying?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's also, I know some counties do have a policy where if fund balance is over a certain percent, then that overage goes to MERS. That overage goes to your defined benefit pension liability, right? As our biggest bill out there
Mhm.
right now,
Hmm.
really. So that's a
Interesting.
thought. We could,
Yeah.
and that's all part of that. I think the goal setting session is gonna have a capital F for finance, right? I mean, there's few things we could talk about, priorities in the county that don't involve finances, the MRF, the jail, a potential juvenile detention facility, wages, benefits. It's all around finances and policies like that, right? We're starting in the budget for capital improvements. We're starting to say, okay, facilities, here's your big chunk of money every year. You don't
Piece of
spend it.
pie.
It goes into an account over here, earmarked for facilities improvements. We're gonna budget for it, right? We're gonna bite the bullet and budget for it. Then we might as well act like we spent it, keep it in a kitty for capital improvements that
You know, you're gonna have,
shouldn't be a surprise.
right, but
to
you're gonna
us.
have, you're gonna have capital improvements and
and they're gonna be
repairs and
big,
maintenance
yeah.
and, right, you better have that money set
Yeah.
aside.
So
Precautionary
we're trying to be smarter about it like that, and I'd love to have that conversation with the board about policies for what to do, right? If we have extra money, where to send it.
Mhm.
It does make us more of a team with administration. So
Yeah,
if things go south, we just can't blame it on
no,
our administrator, controller.
That's right. That's
We're
right.
all
Our
part of the
treasurers,
decision-making
on
process, you know?
that team now too, right? It really does have a.
And that's
a better
refreshing.
feel. It is, and I talked about it last meeting. I think it was a couple weeks ago, we said, you were witness to it. Treasurer Pickens says, Nicole, I think you might need a budget amendment for that bond anticipation note payoff. And I said, oh, it's assigned fund balance. We've got the money. Yeah, but the mechanism to get that into the budget to be able to transfer it out and spend is a budget amendment. So if he hadn't given me that heads up, we would have had a special meeting or something, to
Mhm.
need to do that. So it is really nice to be.
Any other questions about ARPA funding or cash flow or?
Not at this point. No.
All right, then we're gonna move on to the invoice list discussion.
Ooh, oh my, I do have.
Take this out of the way. I looked at them all. I didn't see anything that I had any questions or concerns over. What, 3 of them? Oh, there was a late one sent, the 27th. I tried to open that. I couldn't
I
open it.
wouldn't open all the entries.
So I don't know what the updated,
Was it only the front page?
Yep.
I think
I
so.
think it was only the front page that was sent. The only change was here at the bottom where we say how much is general fund, how much is other
Oh,
funds.
so that's the only thing that changed.
That was the only thing that changed. So
Okay.
going forward, if we update anything, let's make it red, so we know, like, our eye goes to what changed, and we'll do like a little revision up here, like revised staff report. None of the content changed, only on the front, that staff report, yeah.
So I wonder why we couldn't open it up. Either Chris or I could open up the attachment.
So you couldn't
I
even
think
get
that
the
was
front
just the
page?
attachment. I think that was just the attachment, was just the front page.
Well, we got it this morning and it said it was an update and look at the attachment. Well, I opened up the attachment and then I got a little message that could not
Oh, that's
open up
right.
the attachment.
Oh,
That's right, yeah. Yeah, you mentioned that part of it, yeah.
well,
Try to get
Jessica,
down.
can you try to? Well,
was able to open it when
yep,
you said
I
you
did
got it
too.
this morning.
I think so. Well,
Yes. I sent, and it could be timing, or technology is a gift and a curse. So,
it opened now. I tried opening
See,
it
you know,
3 times this morning.
Isn't that weird? You're
What are
right.
your other 2 wishes, Commissioner?
It's sometimes
I
you,
think it's because I'm passing the vibes back and forth.
well, and I'm wondering too, if,
Upset at being set up. I
did you try
think.
to open it up like right away as soon as it came in?
Yes.
See,
Trust
that's,
me, I'm
I
not
think that
that
might be, it. You
savvy.
might have to let it sit for a minute for it to,
It's still.
and stew, yeah.
Sit and stew.
Okay. Well, I don't know what happened, but it opened up now.
Okay, good. That's good to know. I was just gonna go. with-
Thank you, ladies. Good job.
Okay. So anyhow, everything was very familiar. I didn't know, Chris, if you had any questions
Yeah,
on any of these,
Again, so being so new to this,
you're gonna try to open yours too, huh?
I got mine open. I'm just
You
trying
do
to.
have a packet there, Commissioner.
What's
If
that?
you, it should be. And so
Yeah, but I
if
won't know-
that helps you,
Well,
look.
it may,
Yeah.
trying to read this off my phone, but I have some of them highlighted as to which ones I have
Oh,
questions
perfect.
about. McBride Quality Care,
Mhm.
what is the overall big picture of service that they provide to the county? I see them a lot on here in big numbers.
Juvenile oversight, juvenile
Juvenile
detention
detention.
oversight. Some in their bills will be split out based on the level of services that the juvenile needs. So these are court ordered placements. And they're expensive, right?
can
It
see
might
that.
be for one youth for 30 days, it might be for 3 years, for 10 days, I mean, it just, we have to drill down in the invoice to look at. But we also have monthly regular invoices to them, that those are paid through child care fund.
They would contract with them. The level of services, I think the contract is probably a certain level.
Yep.
With other youth that need different leveling or different.
More intense.
supervision.
Mhm.
They break it out by 1 youth for 10 days of the month, or 2 youth, or sometimes those can get. Actually, I think last week when I did the invoice list, I looked at one and one was closer to like 30,000, and I was getting
Yeah.
ready to type in monthly contract. And I look and it's not a monthly contract. That was for maybe 2 or 3 youth for so many days within the. And that's because that's what our monthly contract is. Those can get, that's one of the more expensive ones that I've noticed, the child care fund. Usually that's a whole month's worth contract. If we had 1 or 2 youth that needs certain
Supervision.
supervision for
Okay.
this amount of days to the tune for 1 month,
For 1
$30,000.
Yeah, so I guess that may be a question when I do my tour of the court building. Maybe I can talk with them about what kind of services they provide and what levels they provide and what are the costs associated with those levels. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
Gary Curtis will have.
And the
all of
judge determines the type of services the child needs. And the county has its own non-secured facility too. That we operate, but sometimes the child needs services that can't be provided or needs to have secure detention, and that's where they get housed out.
Okay.
Yeah, and some of the larger families with multiple children, a lot of times multiple children will need placements, and that can lead to some of those invoices that are rather
Very
large.
large. Okay.
I think the judge always prefers to keep the child in the family if it's a
Yeah.
feasible situation, but my
Sometimes.
Parks and Recreation office in Gratiot County was just down a short haul from the officer that made those type of decisions for the court. And sometimes the anger between the child and the family was just so overwhelming. And, when they finally made a decision that they would have to go to secure detention, I mean, just all hell broke loose.
Probably would have done them better to send them down the end of the hall and work in the parks for the summer,
Maybe I'd
you
have
know?
straightened them around.
And there, I have one TAC 10 for $355,000. CAD program approved for new equipment.
Yes.
Oh, it's-
Computer assisted design.
Computer aided
Yeah,
dispatch.
I understand that.
Yes.
So,
So,
so our central dispatch, is that what that is?
yes,
or-
yes. And Mark did come, remember, Mark came to the, well, you weren't here though. You were,
This is before me, that's why I'm asking. I don't recall signing off on.
Well,
yes,
we signed off on a program that didn't work out and Mark came back with another one that he felt would be more advantageous for the county and I think the sheriff was the courts also agreed.
absolutely.
We did approve this purchase.
I see that
And
you
I
did.
think
I just wonder what it was.
$300,000 was budgeted for it, if I remember right, and I think there was going to be some interest savings by paying it all up front type of
Mhm.
thing, and Mark, so what Mark came to the board for was to ask, we did a budget amendment, they approved a budget amendment to move that additional monies from fund balance to be able to
To
pay
pay
for
it all
this.
off and save interest.
Yes,
What's a
There.
database to that, when they're assigning vehicles or whatever, that's the software program manages for the
For the county.
central
For
dispatch. A
central dispatch. Ah, okay. All right.
lot of things in the mix in the decision-making process, and I suspect this is a big help.
you can bring your laptop to these meetings too, if it helps you.
Yeah, I have
I
it.
see him looking over his glasses.
Yeah,
I know,
well, something
that's
like-
hard.
I can do this from down here, but it's easier to do it up here.
No judging at this
Oh,
table.
my God. Where's the other one?
We're still being recorded, right?
We are, so yes.
Okay.
yeah.
Cool,
We
that's
are.
all right.
Which invoice list are you?
We're on the, which one is this now? Back up here. January 20th.
Okay,
The first line is in hats, HATS. Contractual services.
sure. So HATS is Humane Animal Treatment Society,
Okay.
and I believe the current contract is at 155,000. Feels right-ish.
Whatever that amount times 20.
Times 26?
I'm trying to think in my head.
That's our bi-weekly payment to the Humane Animal Treatment Society. We have a contract with them to run our animal shelter.
Ah, okay.
So
they
animal
operate
control, very different from animal
Animal
shelter.
Mhm.
Yes. Yes,
Okay, so that's our bi-weekly payment.
yes. So
To
they run the
operate our
shelter
shelter.
out on Isabella Road.
Mhm.
Be happy to take you out there as part of your tour. It hadn't
That
occurred
would
to
be
me.
good. Yeah,
You can meet their executive director and
be awesome.
tour the shelter. Yeah, they do a great job for us out there.
Cool. Okay. Well, that was the only questions I had. So thank you.
Well, in that you had that question, I had a situation brought up to me by one of my constituents. They have chickens and apparently there's roaming dogs that are killing the chickens. Is that something that is those animal laws could be reimbursed by the county?
Yeah, there is a livestock law on the book still
Who do
where
they
the county,
Approach.
they would approach me,
Okay,
send them to me. Yeah, we pay for, yeah, well, we actually pay for that. There's a statute on the books, a livestock law or something like that,
So
where
the-
we pay for those. It's not, no one's gonna get rich on
Oh,
this.
it's
Let me
not,
tell
right?
you that, it's, but yeah, there's some statutory guidance in that regard.
okay. I guess if we're done with the invoice list discussion, announcements. Anybody have any announcements? No? We'll do another call to the public. With that, we'll adjourn
Very good.
at 11:28.
27, 8.
Thereabouts.
Excellent. Thank